Mayuri Kurotsuchi is the captain of the 12th Division in the Gotei 13 and the second president of the Shinigami Research Institute. His previous lieutenant was Nemu Kurotsuchi, his artificially created daughter, and his current lieutenant is Akin. He formerly served as the third seat of the 12th Division under Kisukura. Mayuri's appearance has a skeletal look to it with a skull-like visage. His face is painted entirely white with the inner portion of his face painted black except his nose. His eyes are a golden color and he constantly bares his teeth, giving the appearance of him smiling. Both his ears are seemingly replaced with stub golden cones. His fingernails are blue and, except the fingernail on his right middle finger, are all short. The one long fingernail is as long as the finger itself. He also wears a white hat with two ends that point to his right and a large purple scarf around his neck. His whole body, even his face and hands, has been painted black and white. He repaints his makeup every morning, as he always removes it before going to bed. Without his makeup, Mayuri has blue hair and honey gold eyes. He has small, slatted portcullises with multiple earrings in place of where his ears would be, and his body is covered in scars. Upon entering Hukomundo, Mayuri reveals a new look. His face paint had changed, with him creating a black cross upon the center of his face covering everything but his nose and a small portion of his lower chin. His ear attachments have become shorter and rounder but wider. His chin has a long golden attachment reminiscent of an Egyptian pharaoh beard. His teeth have become a golden color, and he no longer wears a hat as there is a golden frame around his face. His hair is also styled into horns that slope down from the top of his head and frame his face, which when viewed from the front looks much like a pharaoh's crown. 17 months after Aizen's defeat, Mayuri displays another new look. The black face paint covers much of his face, leaving thin white lines going up his face and a white nose. He wears a long, golden headdress that curves back to his mid-back. Underneath his chin are two opposite-facing strands from the mask. On the back side of the headdress, the 12th Division symbol is painted. Following the first invasion by the Wandenrick, Mayuri dons a bright white overcoat with many ridges on the front. The overcoat also has a hood that has many protrusions that give the appearance of a sun. The shoes he wears have changed to be a plain white pair with the shoes splitting into opposite points at the toe. Under this outfit, he has styled his hair into 3 loops, and his ears are covered by 3 large golden tubes that wrap around the sides of his head. 10 years after Huak's defeat, Mayuri's face is painted to resemble a white and black mask, with the white portion circling his forehead and covering his upper lip and nose, while the black portions consist of his lower lip, chin, and most of his forehead as well as the area around his eyes. He now wears a large golden headpiece resembling a pair of ram's horns curling backward behind his head. 12 years after Huak's defeat, Mayuri's face is largely painted black with white, serrated like fringes on either side. He has returned to wearing the golden cones over his ears and now dons a white headdress styled like a pair of horizontal insect antennae, as well as a vest sectioned into multiple petal-like pieces with large black dots in the center. 110 years ago, Mayuri's appearance was similar to his current appearance, but with minimal details. He was still largely painted white except for the black paint which was arranged around his eyes like a large domino mask. He had gold cones covering his ears and blue hair combed back on the top of his head. While developing the Nemu project, Mayuri's makeup consisted of black, geometrical shapes covering the area of his face above his nose and mouth, with the lines extending to his jaw, and he retained the gold cones on his ears while donning an oddly shaped hat. Mayuri Kurotsuchi is a researcher and personifies the stereotype of the mad scientist. Through his early actions during the Ryoka invasion, he is displayed as sadistic and cruel. He sees everyone and everything not as a living being, but as an object to be researched, including himself. He has little respect or regard for most others and was even willing to turn his men, who were not aware of his plans, into living bombs in an attempt to capture Raya Ishida and Dorheim in a way for experimentation. However, while he usually shows disregard for life, he has been known to warn people of possible dangers when they present themselves. As a scientist, Mayuri despises perfection, as he believes that achieving such a state leaves him with absolutely nothing more to strive for, namely imagination, knowledge, and improvements, which would result in nothing but despair. Because of this, he derided Sailor programs for claiming to be a perfect life form. It is known that Mayuri's favorite food is pike fish and that he does not like onions. One of his free time activities is reading every character published in Siri Itai Communication. He publishes a serialization in the journal, titled Effective Education for the Brain, which contains detailed instructions on the preparation of medicine and their application. Surprisingly, it is highly popular among readers. In battle, Mayuri likes to toy with his opponent, torturing them little by little until they can hardly stand. He did this in both the fight with Raya and his Espada counterparts, Zayla Pro. Every time he fights he uses it as an experiment, testing himself and his opponent little by little. He also uses it as an opportunity to implant microbes or other things in case they get away. Before engaging, though, he will make extensive research on his possible opponents to tilt the chance of winning in his favor. Before the Winter War, he is busy reading in the library with a note on the door saying, "Enter and die." Mayuri's utter disregard for life even extends to the rest of the Gotei 13, believing that all members of the organization are to be prepared to give up their lives in order to protect the Siri Itai. To this end, he would gladly cut down any former comrades, even if they are under the enemy's control, test many of his experimental drugs on such comrades for the sake of his research, which he believes to be the sake of the Siri Itai, and even force his zombified fellow captains to become his minions to fight to their last breath for the sake of Gotei 13 and Soul Society, as opposed to killing them out of mercy. Despite his disregard for most life, Mayuri is very obsessive about creating it, and it is his dream to create a soul out of nothing. This led to him being overjoyed when the 7th test of the Nemu project was successful. Little is known about the early history of Mayuri, except that 110 years ago, he was the only prisoner in the maggot's nest who was considered dangerous enough to necessitate confinement in a small prison cell, chained to the wall by his ankle. He would, however, one day be visited by Kisuke, who was seeking his genius to become vice president in the newly thought-of Shinigami Research and Development Institute, a request that would automatically get him out of there. At first, Mayuri refused, since he is quite content with his life down in the nest, until Kisuke began teasing him with the fact that he had nothing to tinker with down there and that, as vice president, he would inherit everything should something happen to Urahara. At some point, Mayuri read a book detailing the functions of the arms of the Soul King, where he learned that the right arm is in charge of stopping while the left arm is in charge of advancing. 9 years later, while walking through the Siri Itai with Kisuke and Hori Sorugaki, they were greeted by 5th Division Captain Shinji Hiroko and his Lieutenant S.A. Ring Sukezan. Mayuri expressed distaste for Shinji as he refused to call Mayuri by his full name and only called him by his first, which was too familiar for Mayuri's liking. He acted uninterested in the conversation between Urahara and Aizen, who was explaining that the 9th Division had been sent on a special investigation to find out what was happening with the disappearances in the Rakongai. During her brief time as a member of the institute, Hori served as a lab manager, which resulted in clashes with Mayuri, who was then 3rd seat vice president of the Shinigami Research and Development Institute, over who had more authority under the captain. The two constantly got into an ongoing argument about who was in charge, prompting Hori to call in Urahara. He explained to her that with the disappearances occurring he had created a new type of Gege. Before Hori could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Ta Ring Da Ringzaman, the 6th seat of the 9th Division. Urahara agreed to send a researcher over to the investigation site as per the request of Captain Kansai Muguruma of the 9th Division. Urahara elected Hori to go to the site, to which she became irritated and asked why he couldn't send someone less important, referring to lab assistant Akin. He questioned if she should continue being a lieutenant, prompting Hori to attack him, though he simply dodged her. Though reluctant, Hori gave in once Urahara explained that she was the only one that he could trust with the task. After an incident that got Urahara and Tessite Tsukabashi banished and several captains and seated officers hollowified, Mayuri later succeeded Urahara in leading the Research and Development Institute. At some point, Mayuri began developing the Nemu project, which he used to modify his Zanpakutō ring. This development allowed him to succeed Irahara as captain of the 12th Division of the Gotei 13. In the project, he eventually created new life from godly soul cells in the form of Nemu, which made him extremely happy. Though he claimed that creating new souls from nothing was the dream of any Shinigami, Mayuri believed that having a dream while awake was foolish and reflected that in the ironic name of the project. Years later, after the issue of Shinigami being killed in Naruki City was solved, Mayuri listened to Isshin Chiba's report about his findings in a captain's meeting. Although Captain Commander was willing to overlook Isshin's violation of rules, Mayuri expressed his displeasure at how Isshin couldn't bring back the body of the mysterious Hollow. He also experimented on Quincy, including Ring Kaneshida, Rya's master, and grandfather, in his studies. He was disappointed to learn that Rya was a Quincy because he considered his study of the Quincy complete and did not want any further Quincy